You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Or do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 47 after the hour. And you know, since 2010, something that's been bothering the hell out of me is the phenomenon of Stoners Against Legalization. We saw this crop up in Prop 19 days in 2010 when growers, medical marijuana growers, and dispensary owners, mostly in Northern California, used their money and influence to affect other regular cannabis consumers to convince them that voting for their own criminality would be a good idea. We saw an even worse strain of Stoners Against Legalization flare up with I-502 in 2012, when again, medical marijuana growers and dispensary owners used their positions of money and influence to try to convince everyday cannabis consumers to vote for their own criminality. Now, we haven't seen such a virulent strain of that since Washington and Colorado have passed their marijuana legalization, and all the fears of the Stoners Against Legalization failed to come to fruition. You know, like how they'd be shooting hippie fish in a barrel outside a hempfest with the 5 nanogram DUI, and how anyone who possesses an ounce that wasn't bought in a store would be arrested. All those things turned out to be unfounded, hyperbolic scaremongering. But of course, it is a resistant strain, and it still exists in some isolated pockets here in Oregon. I'm on a list called DIP4, the Drug Policy Foundation or Forum of Oregon, I think it's Forum of Oregon. And on that list are various people involved in the marijuana movement here, either on the business side or the activism side. And in that list, we've been having a series of discussions about Measure 91, including some people who say that it's no good. Now, to be fair, the person I'm about to quote says that Measure 91 is better than prohibition, and he will vote for it, but he's got a number of problems with it. The first problem he seems to have with it is that the Oregon Liquor Control Commission would be in charge. And the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, like a lot of liquor commissions across the country, has some allegations of corruption and malfeasance and mismanagement and so on. And so the point he's making is, well, Measure 91's no good because it didn't create a brand new bureaucracy to deal with marijuana. Now, I can understand that point, but you always have to understand when we're trying to pass ballot measures, we're not passing them for us. We've got to write something that people that don't smoke pot will vote for. And they have other concerns as other than just whether or not people go to jail for pot. That motivates my vote. Anything that keeps me out of jail for pot, I'm voting for it. But for the average person out there that doesn't smoke pot, they don't have a dog in the race, or at least they don't realize they have a dog in the race. They've got other concerns, and one of the concerns they have is the growth of government and big government and more inefficient, wasteful bureaucracies. People are buying the treat marijuana like alcohol idea, and even people that have a problem with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission trust the devil they know more than some unknown devil we would be creating out of whole cloth. Our opponents would paint that as growing the government and big bureaucracy. Another point that was made is that this ballot measure only allows 4 plants per household. This comes from an article that was written on someone's blog. They wrote a letter to the editor and pointed out that it only allows 4 plants per household, and that would be unfair to poor people who would get their houses seized if they had more than 4 plants, especially if they're in roommate situations where each roommate had more than 4 plants. And this is a huge logical flaw that all these people bring to the argument. And that is, they compare what they wish they had to what they're getting. They wish they could have unlimited cultivation. What they're getting is 4 plants. And so they're all pissed off about it. Instead of comparing what you got now versus what you're going to get under legalization. How many plants are allowed per household now? 0. If you have one plant in Oregon, it's a felony, worthy of 10 years in prison at a cost of over $300,000 to the taxpayers. One plant is a felony. And Measure 91 proposes not only to make 4 plants legal, but 5 to 7 plants would just be a ticket. 8 to 15 plants would just be a misdemeanor. You'd have to have 16 plants before it became a felony. So this idea that, 4 plants just isn't enough is ludicrous. Another point made by some of these people is it still criminalizes 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Now, I have sympathy for that point. I believe if there's an adult age, and that adult age gives you the right to vote and the duty, if you choose to accept it, to serve your country in the military, then by God, that's enough for you to be able to smoke marijuana if you choose. If you're old enough to put a ballot in your hand or carry a rifle in the sand, you're old enough to put a joint in your hand. That's how I feel about the issue. Now, what's going to pass at the ballot box? You put something up that's an 18-year-old legalization and it's going to fail. And it's going to fail big because 18-year-olds are still teenagers and they're still kids that can be in high school. So no way is that going to pass anytime soon when our opponents would be able to come out and say they're legalizing marijuana for teenagers in high school. Never going to happen. Another consideration, and this comes because Measure 91 allocates 35% of its tax revenues to go to law enforcement. Now, there's so many people in our movement who have what I call the fuck the pigs attitude. Fuck those pigs. Fucking cops. Fucking hate the fucking cops. They got this attitude, right? Folks, you're misplacing your anger. Hate the game, not the playa. The game is corrupt. Marijuana prohibition is corrupt. But cops are something we want. Cops are a good thing. It's good to have an armed force accountable to the public to keep down the criminals and psychopaths and sociopaths out there that would choose to create anarchy in our society. That's a good thing to have police. The bad thing is when police have a law to enforce that oppresses us and we're changing that law. Another, and by the way, that 35% that were given to the cops, it's not just a free carte blanche gift to the cops. 15% of it is. 15% goes straight to the state police. No questions asked. State police, here you go, 15%. But the other 20% is divided 10% for the city cops, 10% for the county cops. But half of what they get depends on how many producer, processor, and wholesaler licenses are in the city or county. And the other half of what they get is dependent on how many retailer licenses they have in the city or county. In other words, cities and counties don't get their 10% cut if they don't allow pot shops and growers. And they get more of a cut the more pot shops and growers they allow. So this isn't so much paying off the police as it is bribing the police and the cities and counties to say, you don't get any of the tax money pie unless you let us play in your pool. Another consideration they've got a problem with. One person put up, well, there's no residency requirements. There's no residency requirements. So that just opens the door for Philip Morris and Marlboro to come in and take over the marijuana market. Folks, that ain't going to happen. Altria, the parent company of Philip Morris and Marlboro and all those guys, is a multinational corporation with global reach. Marijuana is still a Schedule I federal substance. The minute Altria gets into the business of buying, selling, or producing a Schedule I federal substance is the minute the federal government hauls them into court and takes even more of their assets than they've already taken. And trust me, Big Tobacco is not interested in getting into another federal courthouse anytime soon. It didn't work out so good for them back in 1998. Another consideration. I actually have this person's whose article's online who writes, quote, "The tax is too high at $35 per ounce and can be raised at any time by the OLCC, which will have a conflict of interest in regulating a product that directly competes with liquor, which it sells in its own stores." Well. That's a little bit of conspiracy thing. First of all, $35 an ounce is the lowest tax ever proposed on marijuana in this country. The lowest tax. Second of all, that $35 in tax is the only tax possible. All these cities, there's 17 or 18 of them now in Oregon that have passed these resolutions or ordinances to tax marijuana. Those will be invalidated when Measure 91 passes. Those evaporate and go away. Only the state can tax marijuana, and only at $35 an ounce. Now, the OLCC can review those taxes, and they can advise whether the taxes should go up or down. But that advisement has to be in accordance with the intent of the law, which is very clear about derailing the black market. So any raise by the OLCC that would take the price of marijuana grossly over the price of the black market is not going to stand legislative scrutiny or judicial scrutiny. As far as it competing with liquor that it sells in its own stores, the state gets a cut of the taxes that comes off of this, whether they're selling liquor or they're selling marijuana. If it competes with marijuana, they're still getting some tax in. Another complaint here. Let me just get to the final complaint before I run out of time. And that is, this Measure 91's just not good enough. We can wait till 2016. Folks, you are not going to get a better legalization plan than what is offered by Measure 91, which is already the most liberal legalization plan ever offered in the history of man that's made the ballot and has a chance to pass. Now, 2012, you got Measure 80, unlimited production, unlimited cultivation, unlimited possession at home, right? Unlimited. How'd that do? Oh, it got 46% and lost. So what happened 2 years later? You got something more conservative that was 8 ounces and 4 plants. If that loses, do you think 2016 comes around and tries to give you more? Or does 2016 come around and say, oh yeah, well, we overreached in 2014 with 4 plants and 8 ounces. We better cut back. That's exactly what's going to happen if Measure 91 doesn't pass in 2014. Everybody's going to take it as a notice that there's a backlash now against legalization. And folks, this isn't just Oregon. This is a national issue we're talking about. They won't stop talking about how, well, see, Oregon failed 2 years in a row. See, after Washington and Colorado passed, there's buyer's remorse. Nobody wants to legalize anymore. And that makes everyone trying to pass in 2016 have a much higher hurdle to have to clear, and they'll produce much more restrictive legalization. This is the linchpin. Oregon is it. If we pass, the future of legalization is bright and open. If we do not pass, the future of legalization is tight and restricted. Mark my words. That's all the time we got. Thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ. Till next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it.